Today we're talking about why I thought The Handmaid's Tale was badly written. We're looking up to the stars, get lost in time, and wonder if humans are inherently good or evil. Hey, my name is Nicholas, and my goal for this year was to read and review 100 books so that you know what to read next. Let's continue with book number 36. Sea of Tranquility by Emily St. John Mandel. Canadian author Emily St. John Mandel is best known for her post-apocalyptic novel Station 11, which recently got turned into a limited series by HBO Max. Her newest book, Sea of Tranquility, got released just a few months ago in April of this year and was received with rave reviews upon publication. As with the absolutely fantastic novel Piranesi, which I talked about in my last video, this book also gets better the less you know about it beforehand. So, in short, it's a tale about art, time, love, and a pandemic virus that takes the reader through several time periods. From Vancouver Island in 1912 up to the space colonies of the far future. Bit by bit, we as the reader get introduced to these seemingly unrelated characters, all wrapped up in stories of their own, and we're wondering what the tie-in between these characters might be. I really liked Sea of Tranquility, so I will grant it 4.5 stars. It's intelligently written, serene in its tonality, and the story structure is very well thought out. Given that this is a story playing out over several time periods with a multitude of characters, it would have been easy for the reader to get lost, but Mandel paints her characters so differently from each other that you never really lose touch. As I've mentioned earlier, there's a pandemic subplot in this book, which felt a bit too heavily inspired by current events. As the story beats read like news headlines from March 2020. This small criticism aside though, this is a brilliant sci-fi novel for those who are open to the concept of time travel, want to explore a calculated and intertwined story with a multitude of characters. Oh, and by the way, the eponymous Sea of Tranquility is the landing site of Apollo 11, the mission renowned for giving mankind its first ever walk on the moon. It's a wonderful title for this book, as you will find out once you've read it. Infinity in the Palm of Your Hands by Chown. And we're staying up in space, as a few days before recording this video, NASA published the first photos of the recently inaugurated James Webb Space Telescope. These are images from the Carina Nebula about 7,600 light years away from Earth, a turbulent cloud of gas, birthplace and graveyard for some of the Milky Way's hottest and most massive stars. If you're fascinated by these images, chances are you will like Infinity in the Palm of Your Hands. The book's author, Chown, is a British science writer and journalist. He studied under renowned physicist Richard Feynman and is now a cosmology consultant for New Scientist magazine. What a cool job title that is. In this book, he presents 50 short essays about some of the wonders of our universe. It's a fairly short book, with each essay usually not being longer than a double-page spread. He goes from the most microscopic aspects of life up to the weird and bizarre world of quantum theory, trying to make the latter as understandable as possible for us mortal human readers. It lends itself perfectly for the quick read at night before snoozing off, or the short tube ride you have to take in the morning to get to work. I will rate this book 3 stars. Chown is using a trick that, whilst charming in the beginning, can get a bit annoying over time. He begins each essay with a catchy one-line description or question that they twisted out of the topic he wants to explore. For example, he begins one chapter by saying that babies are powered by rocket fuel, and then he elaborates that we as humans need oxygen to power ourselves, as do we need it to power rockets. Hence, babies are powered by the same fuel as rockets, namely oxygen. It therefore all feels a bit clickbaity. You take the science behind it less serious because it's wrapped up in this pop art approach to it. I reckon it's his way of trying to make physics and space as interesting and easy to understand as possible, but I do wonder if this was really necessary. Still, for the science geeks of you, this could be a nice little book to keep on your bedside table. Panenka by Ronan, Hession. The so-called Panenka is a technique in football used while taking a penalty kick, in which the taker, instead of kicking the ball to the left or right of the goalkeeper, gives it a light touch underneath, causing it to rise and then fall within the center of the goal. It was this technique that gave the main character of this novel this burden of a nickname, as 25 years ago he was the last taker in a penalty shootout between his club and its biggest rival. The stakes were super high. The whole city was watching him as he took a run-up, tried to outsmart the goalkeeper by using a Panenka, and the goalkeeper simply caught the ball. Aged 50 now, Panenka is still struggling with the burden of his past, with his town still turned against him and with daily headaches he describes as the Iron Mask. He tries to navigate life, nevertheless, as best as possible, between living with his estranged daughter and grandson, as well as finding love and purpose in unforeseen places. The premise of this book is very unique. A faltering football idol having to deal with the consequences of a lost match 25 years ago is a setting I haven't thought about wanting to explore before. Unfortunately, the story doesn't go as in-depth and isn't as emotional as I wanted it to be, so the book lands at 3.5 stars in the end. Set in a sleepy little town somewhere on the British Isles, the setting feeds on a lot of cliches of sleepy little towns and sparks about as much joy as your local Tesco, meaning it's a bit dry. The book overall has its moments of deep prose, chaos of intelligent thoughts in between. But it also doesn't fully know what it wants to be, as the story bounces between different story arcs like a pinball, giving none of them the emotional weight they deserve. In the end, Panenka has a strong premise that's not fully developed. It's still somewhat of a slow burn though, as by the end you are invested in the characters of this sleepy little town. Humankind by Rutger Bregman. Are humans good by nature? This has been the mother of all philosophical questions for millennia now, and the debate reached somewhat of a high point during the 17th and 18th centuries. It was Jean-Jacques Rousseau who argued that humans are born good by nature, and it's only civilization that ruins them. His counterpart, Thomas Hobbes, argued the other way around and said that mankind was born greedy and wicked and that only society can change them for the better. There wasn't and will probably never be an end to this discussion, but many philosophers ever since try to chip in and give their point of view, like Dutch author Rutger Bregman does here in his most recent book, Humankind. You might know him from a TED Talk that he gave a few years ago, arguing in favor of basic income, or when he prompted the world's billionaires at the Economic Forum in Davos to pay more taxes. In this book then, Bregman makes the case that humans evolved to be good, that we are social animals thriving in a community, which is what set us apart from Neanderthals back in the day. On the basis of several case studies and single examples, he argues in favor of both Rousseau and Hobbes, picking arguments as he sees fit to paint a picture of Homo sapiens evolving to become a wholesome and social animal, the Homo puppy as he calls it. The book sets off to a very strong start, but is losing its momentum a few chapters in. Could it have held the pace from the beginning, it would have ranked much higher, but in the end Humankind lands on 4 stars for me. It makes a compelling case for the good side of the good versus evil discussion, but this case is hanging on thin threads, as the author is too fixated on single studies or isolated anecdotes, and thereby crafting a one-sided argument in my mind. You still get some interesting scientific tidbits and insights into well-known experiments from the past, and given the current political and social state the world is in, the message this book tries to convey might be direly needed. So if you're up for a bit of optimism, give it a try. The Handmaid's Tale by Margaret Atwood. I'm recording this video a few weeks after the US Supreme Court overturned Roe vs. Wade and thereby ended the constitutional right to getting an abortion for millions of US women. In the heat of the ruling, protesters compared the America they live in today to that of Gilead, a fictional dystopian state from Margaret Atwood's groundbreaking novel A Handmaid's Tale. Published in 1985, the book was provoking and progressive for its time, as it openly touched on sensitive and subjective topics such as sex, religion, reproductive rights, feminism, and fundamentalism. It got banned in several states, as its anti-Christian themes and provocative underlying message offended fundamentally religious groups to the point that they saw the book as an attack on their religion. The world of The Handmaid's Tale is unlike any other dystopian setting I know. Following a military coup, the United States became the Republic of Gilead, a land that suppresses women in every conceivable way and boils them down to being pure breeding machines or handmaidens for their overlords, the so-called commanders. The women in this world are wearing special clothing that prevents them from even looking left and right. They are not allowed to read or to talk to each other unnecessarily. Every now and then they are part of a reproductive ceremony in which they are forced to sleep with their commanders in order to produce offspring. In this sinister setting, we follow Offred, one of the handmaidens, as she navigates this grim world, every now and then catching a glimpse of her past life long forgotten. She's not fully broken by the system just yet, and her inner rebel tries to circumvent the laws of Gilead as best as possible, in the hopes to come out alive on the other side. On paper, this all sounds like the groundwork for a thrilling and captivating story, but if I take the importance and relevancy of the book's message out of the equation, what is left over will get 3 stars from me. In my mind, the book is mediocre in its writing and storytelling, almost a bit clumsy at times. It has no real flow and lacks actual story progression. To me, the author needed about 80% of the book to set up the world and prepare the reader for the final story beats. At this point, you're already 190 pages in. She also doesn't seem to care about when to use quotation marks, as sometimes you can't tell whether a character is actively talking or just thinking something. Every now and then we also make sudden time jumps when Offred remembers details from her past life, which can also be confusing in their positioning and introduction within the story. So overall, the writing feels a bit like a mess, which is a shame, as the tension of the world itself also suffers from this. Nevertheless, the patriarchal setting, drenched in overly religious and cult-like symbolism, can make you sick to read at times, which is exactly the point, of course. Unfortunately, the author leaves so much potential untouched to make the book more captivating. The question remains, of course, whether it needs a more thrilling story to begin with, as its dystopian setting is shockingly relevant, and at least because of that, The Handmaid's Tale is probably still worth a read in 2022. Read it for the underlying message though, not so much for the expectation of a captivating story. I would love to know what you thought about The Handmaid's Tale, down in the comments below. Don't forget to check out my description for links to all the books I've talked about today. And for more book reviews, have a look at this playlist right here. Thank you and see you next time. Ciao.